let's go ahead and review the Farmers Insurance Open last week. So one thing I want you guys to focus in on, we're looking at this column here. That is this year's totals. If this shows a Y, that means the bucket that correlates with it as you look across means it was successful. And what I determined successful is, well, we look at the projections that I had. You know, we have our minimum, our maximum, the amount of golfers that finished inside the top 10 in that bucket. Did it fit in those projections? And if it didn't, did the optimal line up? And these are really the only two checkpoints I'm looking at. I'm not really looking at the SweetSpot optimal, but I did build a lineup using the buckets really, really strictly. We'll get into that when I show you what that lineup is, because we want to see if that still beats a GPP winning lineup if it does not hit the optimal, because either way, then it's still a success. So as you can see, there's a lot of Y's on the screen. There is only one no. Only one no. When we look at that recent form 5 bucket, these are golfers coming in with really bad recent form. We usually don't see a lot of golfers from this bucket perform successfully. Now, I was projecting somewhere between 0 to 1. One of them finished inside the top 10. However, the optimal lineup had 2 golfers from this bucket in it, because sometimes it doesn't require all 6 golfers to be inside the top 10 to hit the optimal. So we can look at this as a success, because that's all I'm trying to do is project top 10s, which that obviously means this was successful. But I'm also looking at optimal lineups, you know, because that's what we're chasing. We're trying to hit the optimal lineup. Now, usually I like to look at this bucket over here, or this column here. This is kind of like this incorporates the SweetSpot score, which is my whole modeling system. Sometimes this is higher than, like, the max projection from here is higher than what I have that I go by, I should say. So then it's like kind of a win-win. So all the buckets, I mean, 35 out of 36 were successful. And we actually did project the right amount of golfers from this one finishing inside the top 10. So it's really hard to say we weren't 100% perfect. But if that wasn't good enough, we can always look at the GPP winning lineup and compare that to the SweetSpot optimal. I'll first talk about the optimal lineup, which used up all $50,000 of the salary. It scored 583 points. And it used Max Homa. Let's actually break down. So you needed a 10K golfer. You needed 2 9K golfers, an 8K golfer, 7, and a $6,300 Eric Barnes, who placed 13th place. It's a really interesting way of building lineups. Now, again, you follow the 10-9-8, 7-7-6 approach. You'd sub one of those 7Ks all the way up to a 9K, which really, it almost never happens. But we're using our flat 10K golfer in Morikawa, a very low 9K golfer in Max Homa, arguably another low 9K golfer in Sung Ji Im. 9,300 is kind of on the low end of the 9K range. A low 8K golfer, 8,300, a low 6K. This all makes it work out, and then a flat 7. So it's all the low end price points of those salary ranges. And that's how it works out. But hey, you can make up to 2 substitutions. I'd almost consider that 2 substitutions all by itself, going from a 7 all the way up to a 9, because you're subbing up to an 8 and then up to a 9. It's not just one giant leap as a substitution in my mind, because how else do you build lineups? Like, it's difficult to do something like this without having a really low 6K golfer. But anyways, that's a really interesting optimal lineup. Now, again, that scored 583 points. The GPP winning lineup scored 541 points. It also used up $50,000 of the salary, and that's all the golfers here in blue. So what we have is a very balanced build, including Eric Barnes. So we had a 9K golfer, Max Homa, 8,700 Sahith Theegala, 8,800 Jason Day, $9,000 Hideki Matsuyama, $8,100 Justin Rose, and $6,300 Eric Barnes. So Eric Barnes was the guy apparently you need to go to regardless. GPP winner, optimal lineup. That was very balanced. However, using only the buckets, very strict conditionals. So when I go over these in the strategy video, when I build lineups and I'm using the buckets very strictly, that is also what I did here. And when we do that, we score 554. So that was 13 points more than the GPP winning lineup, and it's 30 points less than the optimal. It used up $49,600. So again, if we follow the sweet spot optimal, we can still take down a GPP during the Farmers Insurance Open, which to me says the sweet spot process was 100% successful. So the golfers you wanted there, Jon Rahm, that was like one of those points of contention. Do we go with Rahm? If you recall, the sweet spot process also incorporates the Marquee Tee Times. So when I look at that, we're going to go back to the sweet spot optimal, but I want you to see what grab everyone. We go by group rank, and then I'm going to highlight 3 golfers at a time here. I mean, every golfer that's in a group. Now, this is so crazy. My rules with this, so we have 9 Marquee Tee Times. You want to grab somewhere between 2 to 4 golfers from the Marquee Tee Times and put them in your lineup. Anchor around those guys in your lineup. Also, another rule is don't play more than 1 golfer from each group, because we rarely ever see 2 guys from the same group finish inside the optimal lineup. Well, you obviously see on the screen, there are 2 groups that have 2 golfers that were in the optimal lineup. So this is like the rarest of the rare gems that you can ever find when doing this, because this is the first time I've ever seen this when keeping track of the Marquee Tee Times. We had Max Homa and Colin Morikawa in the second group. Oh, he's blue, so that's why. They both were golfing together Wednesday, Thursday, because it started on Wednesday. And then you had Keegan Bradley and Sung Jae Im in the same group as well. That finished inside the optimal lineup. It's insane. But if we're following the sweet spot process, like I just said, grab 2 to 4 guys and don't grab a golfer from the same group. So you can then see, that's why we pick Rahm. So all this green in column K, the highlighted salaries in green, those are your sweet spot optimal lineup guys. So it works out. We're grabbing Rahm, we're grabbing Max Homa, and we're grabbing Keegan Bradley. So that's why the sweet spot optimal is using Jon Rahm instead of Colin Morikawa, because I would go with the 10K golfer, the one that scored the most points. I mean, I guess Morikawa only scored, what, 2 more points than Rahm? 2.5 more points? Yeah. And the finishing place was a little bit off. So either way, we still go with Rahm, starting at 11.6. Then we go to Max Homa. Now, when I do my strategy videos, I'm trying to kind of force my first instinct lineup. I was going with Jon Rahm and Taylor Montgomery. As I was building lineups after that pod, I just let the optimizer do its work, and I locked in Rahm. The first golfer that it chose was Max Homa. And even when I went with Rahm and say like another 7K guy or another 8K guy, it always brought in Max Homa. So I just thought then and there, you know what? I'm going to build a lot of my lineups with Jon Rahm and Max Homa. And I was right. It worked out. Like, that's what I love about the bucket system. That's what I love about my optimizer, is it can get me on guys like that when I'm not trying to put any bias into it. Now, the only bias I really had was Jon Rahm. I thought Jon Rahm was going to get 3 wins in a row. I think he's that generational talent that can do something like that. He was really close. I didn't get to watch a lot of golf Saturday, I should say. That was the final round. I didn't get to watch a lot of golf, so I don't know what happened to Rahm. I'm assuming burnout, perhaps. It is Torrey Pines. He's in the last group. I'm assuming the greens were hard. He couldn't make any putts, but what I saw kind of in the shot tracker on the PGA Tour app was just he wasn't hitting his irons very well. So I don't know. I don't know exactly what transpired with Rahm's game. Doesn't matter. He was still in the sweet spot optimal. If you had played him and you paired him up with Homa, there was a path that would have gotten you to win a GPP. And that's all that matters. So anybody who's trying to do victory laps saying, Rahm wasn't the optimal, Rahm wasn't in the GPP winning lineup. No, but I could still kick your ass by putting Rahm in a lineup. That's all that matters. So the sweet spot optimal would have been 11.6 with John Rahm, 9,100 with Max Homa, 8,300 with Keegan Bradley, flat 7 with Sam Ryder. We are including Eric Barnes, so he's the trifecta. He's in the optimal, the GPP winning lineup, as well as the sweet spot optimal. Then we're going with Brendan Steele, which I was on as well. A lot of my lineups started with Rahm, Homa, Steele. And guess what? I won $270. I only put $70 in. It all worked out. Or I think $240. I can't remember. It was something like that. Still tripled my investment. It all worked out. I went with the right core. And that's what the whole sweet spot process is all about. Hitting the right core, using the buckets, using the anchor buckets, which, you know, that's what we used. I wish there was an easy way to show you the anchor buckets without really diving into it. I would just say this. Check out the strategy video where we do the anchor buckets. We called out a lot of the golfers that did fit in those anchors. John Rahm was one of them, obviously. I believe Jason Day was also in a lot of the buckets. Well, there he is. He finished 7th place. Didn't score a lot of points, you know, when it comes to DraftKings, but he was doable. He was in the GPP winning lineup. Go check out the anchor buckets in the preview video. You're going to see that pretty much hit the head on the nail. I mean, we just saw 35 out of 36 buckets were successful in projecting the right amount of golfers inside the top 10. And I should actually say it was 36 out of 36. Because if it wasn't for that optimal lineup conditional that I put in there as well, it would have shown up that it was 36 out of 36 correct.